Hello, everyone. I'm not going to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because everyone's going to be listening at a different time wherever you are in the world. So I am Christine Von Pander, and I'm currently hosting two clubs here on Clubhouse. Cookies from the Universe, which is here to help people navigate the current revolution with ease and stay in flow. And this club, I have people for that, where we talk about business tools to run your business better. Today, my guest is Andrei Mincov. Andrei is the founder and CEO of Trademark Factory, the only company in the world that offers trademarking services with a guaranteed result for a guaranteed budget. Andrei's 25-year career in the field of intellectual property started when Andrei helped his father, a famous Russian composer, fight a radio station that stole his music to make an ad for Samsung. A best-selling author of 7 books on intellectual property, Andrei has helped thousands of clients protect their IP. Among them, Apple, Facebook, Google, J.K. Rowling, Dan Lok, eWomen Network, and many, many more, including me. I have 2 trademarks now, and I'm working on my 3rd. So, Andrei, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm working on figuring out this mute unmute thing. So
Okay.
if I accidentally talk when I'm muted, let me know. But it's great to be
I
here.
will.
Thanks for the invite, and I'm really excited to share with the audience what they're willing to know about trademarks.
All right. So that's great. Sorry, I was just sending a back channel note back to Kurt. So I'm going to let everyone know that if you want to ask a question, if you have a comment or a story that you'd like to tell that's in line with our topic for tonight, please do raise your hand and I will bring you up on stage and we'll get you to have a chance to ask your question or tell us your story, your trademarking story, good, bad, or ugly. So I'll kick us off here, Andrei. And every 15 minutes, I will give you a bit of a break so you can get a drink of water and mute your microphone for a minute, and I'll do what's called a room reset. So just so that you're aware that I'll be doing that when it fits in logically with the flow of the conversation, of course. So why did becoming a trademark lawyer mean so much to you?
Well, where do I start? The whole thing, as you mentioned in the intro, started with me helping my dad fight a Russian radio station that stole his song that I actually used to sing with him on stage when I was like 5 years old or something. They
Oh,
took they took a song, and so what he did is he heard his song on the radio advertising an event by Samsung, and he called the radio station and told them that they couldn't just take his music and use it as they wanted. And they told him to sit down, shut up, and be happy that they were making his music even more famous. And if you knew my dad, you'd know right away it was not the way to answer his his concern. So he back then I was still living in Russia, and I was attending my first law school, and so he asked me if I could help take this case to court for him. And in Russia, you don't need to be a licensed attorney to help people go to court in civil matters. So I said, sure, well, let's do it. I had no idea about intellectual property at all, but I admired my dad so much that of course, I couldn't say anything, but sure, let's do it. And we did. I had to take this first case all the way up to one level below the Supreme Court of Russia, which is pretty much as high as it goes. And we won
wow.
eventually. And I got really passionate about helping people protect that which only exists because they created it, something that wouldn't be there if not for their creativity. And I've been doing IP ever since, worked for the biggest international law firm in the world, helping all those big clients that you named. And then 15 years ago, I decided that I had had enough of Russia, and I moved to Canada, and I had to go back to second law school, did my second law degree, and started my company, my law firm back in 2011. Yeah, and very quickly I realized that it doesn't matter how good of a lawyer I was. If I didn't have clients, I wouldn't have a very successful law firm. So it was my first journey into entrepreneurship, and in that capacity, I was learning so much in the first few years, and really doing less and less lawyering and more business building. And very quickly, I realized that the unfulfilled, there was a massive unfulfilled need among North American entrepreneurs and business owners when it comes to trademarks, in that uh, there are no companies in the world that offer trademarking services with a high success rate that is guaranteed, that charge a predictable amount of money, right? So you have a bunch of those cheap filing services that will file your trademark for next to nothing. But when it doesn't go through, and it doesn't go through in more than 2/3 of the cases, you're left with, you're on your own. You have to figure this out on your own, because they're not authorized to correspond with the trademarks office on your behalf. And so that's one option. The other option, of course, are the traditional law firms. And the problem with traditional law firms is, but most of them are good at what they do. They treat the client just as a walking, breathing ATM. And with trademarking process, what most entrepreneurs don't realize is that it's a long process. It takes over a year. In some cases, it takes multiple years. And during those years, during months or years, there are a lot of different steps, a lot of moving parts, and law firms are all too happy to put a uh, price tag on every one of those steps. That when the brand owner looks at the price to file their trademark, like, yeah, I mean, everything else is probably optional. I won't need that, but they do, and that's how $500 filing can easily become a 5,000 or even $7,000 file, and some of them cost even clients even more. So what I wanted to do, what I wanted to give to the entrepreneur community, really is a way to do trademarks like they wouldn't be able to get anywhere else, which is a guaranteed result for a guaranteed budget, which is what they're getting with Trademark Factory. So it's a long answer to a short question, but I hope it answers it. Yeah.
That is, and me personally, because I have done two trademarks already, and I know the process. That the first one wasn't too bad. It was pretty straightforward and direct, and there wasn't too much pushback from the trademark offices. But my most recent trademark, there was a lot of pushback from both the Canadian and the U.S. trademark offices. So I really appreciated that your team was on it, and that I didn't have to dig into my pocket anytime something came up. So I wasn't afraid to receive the emails from Trademark Factory's office. I wasn't afraid to open them thinking that there might be a bill in there as well, for something else. So I was really grateful for that, and now I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't trademark anything any other way. So, and I'm my next trademark is coming up here that I'm going to be doing. So I'm just waiting for the right time to get that all over to your folks at Trademark Factory. So I'm pretty excited about that one too. And I'm just curious, how
I
are
hope I
you
hope your
able?
next I hope your next trademark is going to be more profitable for us, because with all the back and forth, like, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be. I've already done some research, some and myself ahead of time, to make sure that there shouldn't be any issues. So
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding,
we'll
because really
we'll
it's
keep
yeah,
we'll keep
yeah,
our fingers crossed.
yeah. Yeah.
So if anybody listening live or listening on the replay, if you are interested in anything to do with trademarking your brand and your company, click on the link at the top of the page and set up a time, set up a meeting, and they'll be able to answer all of your questions on the line. But we're going to get some of them answered from Andrei now while we have him here in person. So, how are you able to help so many people get their trademarks?
And I think this plays really well to your trademark and what you do is I have people for that, right? I've built an amazing team. What I realized, going back to this idea that I was doing less and less lawyering and more business building, what I realized is that my biggest strength as as a human really is about systemizing stuff, is building systems, building processes, building teams, and um, very early on when I was just starting out, I found myself in the situation when I was doing both the sales and the client work, and I couldn't do both of them at the same time well, right? One would always suffer, and usually both would suffer, and I would have to sacrifice one for the other, and I had to make the decision when I was hiring my first person what I was going to give up, right? And I realized that I was that was easier to replicate the legal side of trademarking because there are textbooks, there are check boxes, there are people who've gone through training, but there was only at that point me who was able to communicate the message properly. So we started, building the legal side of the company, and then now I have an entire team where there's 25 people, I think, in the firm right now. It just keeps changing every week, and the way this works is we no longer really see ourselves as um, a legal services company. We see ourselves as communication plus insurance company, right? Because really, as I mentioned, right, there's a bunch of law firms that can do your trademarks. The legal side of it is not uniquely hard. What is uniquely hard is creating the experience for clients so that they feel understood, so that they know what's going on, and give them the guarantees, right? So I have an amazing team. Like there's a bunch of coders who make the tech side of it happen. There's a legal team. We've just hired two more people last week. There's sales and marketing team who do their stuff, and all I do is generate big ideas, and occasionally shed a tear of happiness seeing that my original idea that I came up with 11 years ago is now finally working. If you remember uh, Back to the Future Part One,
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
there was a moment when Marty comes to Doc Brown for the first time and tells him the story of the time machine from through the closed door, and Doc finally opens the door and yells at Marty, "Do you know what this means? It means I finally invented something that works." you know, so I after years and years of trying to get somewhere with Trademark Factory to the metrics that I've been wanting to reach. When we're there, I feel like Doc Brown like finally invented something that works. So yeah.
That's awesome. I like the analogy too. That you definitely had a vision when you started and you evolved it as things changed and availability, to be able to build the software and everything and the whole infrastructure. It's not just a software. There's this whole infrastructure of people and processes and search engines and all of this stuff going on in the background that is happening 24/7, and you've got your human team, to make sure everything in each of those categories stays in sync and moving all the time. So that's a beautiful. I'm a systems and processes person as well, so I get it, and I see how much work. And I've known you for years and years, so I've seen the evolution of Trademark Factory, and seeing how I was there at a lot of the networking events that you were at, and things like that. So getting the foundation laid, and you really did a great job of laying that foundation and then building up from there, which was awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And of course, same, right? We've been to the same events, doing different sort of things, and you, Patrick, and it's 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 just quite a feeling to look back at this and and I often have this conversation with my CTO, who basically was our web developer. He stayed with the company for the longest out of all of them. I think it was like 8 years now, and um, we look back at some of the old stuff we were doing that didn't really work but is working now, and it's interesting because we realize that what's working now wouldn't have existed had we not made all the stupid mistakes we made back in the day. All those iterations, all those tries and errors that got us to where we are, right? And it's just a journey, and the goal really that I see now is to go through those uh, trials and errors faster rather than try to uh, build build a company on the assumption that it's possible to just skip from point A to point W, while skipping everything in between. Doesn't work that way.
You bet, you bet. And now, I mean, now that the technology's gone further and all of that sort of thing, so there's a lot of things that you can get from A to W faster. But I believe you. I don't think it's going to be the learning curve of everything. I don't think is going to be much different. It's just going to be different things that you're having to learn. Now there's all these different social medias, and on and on and on, and so many other things to investigate. And now there's what web 3 or web 5 or something like that that's coming out, that's going to be changing a bunch of things as well. So people are getting ready for that, so that's another whole learning curve on top of everything that you've already accomplished. So I can see that it's going to be constant growing, constant changing, constant evolution. A business is the same as a human, right? It has to keep growing and evolving.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. So I had a couple of people ask me, how many countries in the world can you trademark in?
What? So
Is there any countries in the world that you can't trademark?
So when you say you, are you referring to you as in Trademark
Oh,
Factory, or you as in
no, no,
anybody?
you as in a business that wants to trademark your business. Is there any country in the world that you can't trademark in, or that doesn't recognize that sort of system?
Okay, so that's a great question. So first of all, trademarks are done on a per country basis, right? There's no such thing as a global trademark, and this is probably one of the biggest problems with the current trademarking system. It used to work fine back in the day when the world was a much bigger place, right? When products and services didn't travel so quickly as they do now, when uh, obviously the internet didn't exist. So back in the day, the whole thing made a lot of sense, and now it barely doesn't, because so many business owners who come to us, they're like, well, we sell worldwide. And when we tell them there's no such thing as a global trademark, and that if they wanted to protect their brand everywhere, they have to trademark their brand everywhere, and that's going to cost a pretty penny. So, which is, what all the big brands do, but most normal small to mid-sized businesses, they rarely can afford that. So that's the first idea, right? There are international treaties that make it easier to file your trademark in multiple countries and cheaper. Uh, these treaties, like I'm referring to a Madrid trademark agreement and protocol, which starts making sense after you file your trademark in 7 countries or more. If it's less, you're better off doing it directly in each country. And through that system, you can pretty much cover every country out there. There's still a few dozen countries that are not part of that treaty. Canada just recently joined it finally after about 100 years of waiting.
Wow.
And yeah, they which is a big deal for Canadians because they couldn't use what most of the world could, and so that's a good thing. But there are, actually, I don't have the exact answer to your question. If there are any countries that don't recognize, uh, so when we say about recognizing trademarks, right? Countries, they're not required to recognize trademarks registered in other countries, right? So a trademark
Okay.
registered in the US has no value in Canada or France or Zanzibar. So just because you trademark your brand in Canada doesn't mean that you have any protection in the US. So in terms of recognition, there is none. But in
Okay.
terms of you being able to protect your brand in those other countries, you can do that with pretty much all countries out there. Um, and again, whether you do it directly or whether you do it through this international system is a different issue. But I'm not 100% sure. So I know with copyright, Afghanistan does not recognize any copyrights. I don't
Hmm.
know if they recognize trademarks, but really this is such fringe
Hmm.
minority of territories and countries that don't recognize trademarks. I really doubt that anyone in this audience is going to be overly upset if they couldn't trademark their brand, like, I don't know, in
In
Afghanistan,
Afghanistan.
right?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So then that begs the question, where is Trademark Factory's market area territory? Can Trademark Factory register a trademark on behalf of a client anywhere in the world that is recognized? Or do you have to go to legal counsel in each of the different countries?
So that again goes back to what does you mean? So we
You
can,
means
on
Trademark
behalf of the
Factory in this
client, get.
case.
Yeah. So we can, on behalf of the client, get their brand trademarked anywhere that is possible to trademark their brand, right? Which is really, like I told you in the beginning, right? We see ourselves more as a communication and insurance company than we are a legal services company because obviously, none of us are educated or licensed in all except all countries of the world. We're not, right? But we understand trademarking enough to be able to have a meaningful conversation with lawyers and trademark agents and attorneys in those jurisdictions to make sure that they're not screwing us over or the clients over, and we can then have we can act as the buffer between them and the client. So the way I see it, we are agents between the client and for the client as we represent them to the legal professionals in those countries. And those legal professionals are agents of our clients when they deal with the local trademark offices, right? So the short answer is if you want to trademark in Zanzibar, we'll find someone in Zanzibar that files trademarks, and we're going to make sure that they have good success rate, and then we're going to give you one flat fee, and we're going to give you 100% money back guarantee that, when we choose this attorney for you, if the trademark that you want doesn't go through, you get all your money back, and that no matter what happens in the process, you're not going to pay us a penny more, right? So hence this idea, when I was kind of laughing it up a little bit about, I hope your next trademark is more profitable for us, because, with the one flat fee, right, whatever happens in the process is our problem. It's not your problem, right? And that's the beauty of what we offer, I think, and that's what has drawn, thousands of clients that we've dealt with to Trademark Factory, because I find that entrepreneurs are tired of paying for uncertain results, right?
Yes,
And
I would
that's that,
agree. Being an entrepreneur, I would absolutely agree with that.
right?
In every type of service that we get, from web, creating a web
Right? Because
page,
you pay and
all the
pay
way
and pay and
to
pay, and then you look
everything.
back and like, what exactly did I pay? Yeah. So we want to give clients the peace of mind of knowing that they're going to get exactly what they're paying for, right? And obviously, a trademark, you trademark your brand. It doesn't automatically, turn your tiny business into the Apple or Amazon of this world. It won't, right? It's up to you to build that brand into something that matters. But not having a trademark, you will never grow a business big enough, because if you look at all the successful businesses out there, you can't, like, I challenge anyone to think of a successful business, any successful business in any industry, without thinking of its brand.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, right? It's impossible, because the brand is what we're thinking about when we're thinking of a successful business,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Uh, and the second part of that challenge is, now try thinking of any successful brand out there that's not trademarked.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there aren't any, because by the time your brand
Oh,
becomes successful,
mm-hmm.
someone will have trademarked it.
Yes.
Might as well be you,
Might as well, yeah.
right?
So
And
that you don't have to go and
all
rebrand yourself
right,
after the fact.
yeah, yeah, and all successful companies understand this, right? That's why Apple would never make any announcements for any new products, any new features. Like, Apple has over 1,300 trademarks in US alone,
Yeah.
right? They trademark icons for their apps. They trademark like all sorts of crazy stuff, right? For the simple reason is that they realize that the cost of owning it is so much, it's so small compared to the potential risk of not owning it,
Right. And somebody else
right?
ripping it
And
off in a different country or
exactly,
wherever. Yeah.
and them having to fight over it. And so
Mm-hmm.
they do it really early on. They've got a whole strategy, and usually what they end up doing is they, because they're so big, and also goes back to your question about countries, right? So what they usually do is, because they have branches in all sorts of countries, right? They don't necessarily want to reveal their plans, because people have figured it out. So they look for new filings from Apple all the time, right? There are people who monitor, what did Apple file today, right? And when they see a new filing, they know, oh, that's how a lot of leaks from Apple are revealed, because they see what they're filing, right? So they figured that out. So what they do now is they file their trademarks in some obscure countries on behalf of their local subsidiary, and that gives them 6 months grace period to file that same trademark anywhere else in the world,
Oh, that's smart.
and back and backdated, right? So now, instead of watching just USPTO, which makes it very easy to spot new filings, they just file their trademarks in some tiny countries, in Asia, in Africa, and then they, make things a little bit more public, and then they file their trademarks everywhere else. So there's quite a bit that goes into this.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. So I'm going to give you a minute to turn off your mic and get a drink of water. And I'm going to do a quick room reset for people that are listening. For those of us just joining us, for those of you just joining us, welcome to the I Have People for That Club. This is where we help your business get the tools you need to accelerate your company's growth by presenting tools you can start using now. Please click on Andrei's handsome image to check out his bio and follow him on this app. And if what he's saying is resonating for you, please click the pinned link at the top of the screen to connect with Andrei. And so what I would also say is if you're liking what you're hearing, go to the top of the page and click on the little green house and follow the club, and you will get notifications when the club goes live. So my next question for you, Andrei, sorry about that. When is the best time for someone thinking of trademarking in their business to call you? When is the best time in their process of starting their business for them to call you?
As soon as they realize that they might end up building something successful in the future. Seriously, trademarks is a long process, right? And unlike a domain name where you pay, $8 and you have it, it doesn't work the same way with trademarks. When you file your trademark, it won't even be looked at by the trademarks office months and months and months after it's been filed. In the US, it's now 9 months gap. In Canada, it's over 3 years now, right? Which is pretty
Yikes.
embarrassing. But the fact is, as much as we're guaranteeing the result, right? We can't. The guarantee is like when you buy a car, right? That comes with a guarantee. It's not that you know for sure that the car will never break down. It's that you're sure that if it does break down, there will be someone who's going to fix it or give you your money back, right? So the answer to this is you want to do it as early as humanly possible, because if someone files a trademark, a similar trademark, not even the identical trademark, a similar trademark, a day or even a minute before you do, so they're going to have a smaller application number than you. They're going to get the trademark and not you. So, and we've had this situation with a lot of clients who came to us. They asked us a bunch of questions. We told them how much we charge, and like, yeah, I'm going to think about it, and I got to look at my finances, and we've all heard those excuses from a lot of people, and they thought about it. They looked at their finances, and they got back to us a few months later, and even though initially we told them, yeah, it looks like your brand is registrable, uh, by the time they got back to us, it wasn't anymore. And so we had to tell them, yeah, now what was trademarkable back then is no longer trademarkable. So you have to go back to the drawing board and
Yikes.
come up with something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was obviously a lot of frustration and understandable frustration, because we usually don't value things that are easy to get, and we suddenly really want to have the things that we can't have.
Human
But
nature at its best.
yeah, yeah, and the hang on, I was going somewhere with it. Hang on, I just completely lost my train of thought. Um,
So
yes.
first mover advantage.
It's a question. Really well. It's one thing, yeah, and the other thing is who needs a trademark, right? So not the way I look at it. If you expect to make at least six figures selling products or services or courses or anything under your brand in the next 2 years or more, if you think your brand is still going to be around 2 years from now, you got to trademark it. No question about that. The only reason you wouldn't want to own the brand that you're working hard to build and advertise is if you either think that the brand is going to be short-lived, so by the time you retire the brand, so by the time that it could get registered as a trademark in theory, right, a year or two or three from now, you know that the brand is not going to exist anymore, so you're going to own a dead asset, right? Then you don't need to trademark it. Or if you don't believe that the brand is going to make you any money, so it's like a kind of a hobby project, you also don't need to trademark that. But in any other situation, you want to own the brand you're building, right? I always say there's no reason in the world to spend a minute of your life or a dollar out of your pocket building a brand you don't own. And the only way to own a brand is to trademark it before somebody else does. So that's kind of the answer to your question.
Yes. Wow. Okay. So, what are some of the things people should think about after they have their trademark registered? Because that's not the end of the story. Getting it trademarked is not the end of the story, right?
No, it's not the end of the story. The biggest part of what you should do is you should continue to preserve evidence of use, right? That you're still using the brand, preserve screenshots of your website that shows the trademark. If you're selling physical products, preserve copies of, photographs of the product with a brand, preserve invoices, preserve your advertising figures. And the reason you need to preserve all of that is that uh, any registered trademark can be canceled at the request of any interested party who believes that you are no longer using the brand, that you're no longer selling products or services under your brand, that you've basically abandoned any interest in owning that brand. And if such a request is initiated against your trademark, you have to show to the trademarks office, no, 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 we're actually still out there. We're actively using the trademark. Here it is. And if you are unable to show that to the satisfaction of the trademarks office, they're just going to kill your trademark, right? So
Wow,
that
that's brutal.
that's yeah, and we've seen that, and really we've seen that on both sides when we were attacking someone else's trademark. And we also saw that on the receiving end when someone would try to attack our client's trademark. And uh, if if the client really has use, it's relatively easy to win that. And if they don't, there's very little we can do. Funny enough, so if I have a second, I'm gonna share a
Oh, for
little bit of a
sure.
personal story
Yeah.
around this.
Yeah,
Yeah, cool.
please go ahead.
So when I was starting out with Trademark Factory, I filed my trademark in Canada, filed my trademark in the US for Trademark Factory. And in the US, we actually got an office action from the trademarks office that said they wouldn't register our trademark because there was another confusingly similar trademark in the name of Patent Factory. I had no idea about them because they were not active. But somebody owned the trademark Patent Factory, which also actually is a good example of how trademarks work, right? Patent Factory and Trademark Factory are two different things, but the marks were considered similar enough by the trademarks office to stop us from getting Trademark Factory registered. So what I did is I um, decided, okay, Patent Factory, who owns it, right? I might reach out to the guy and maybe get some sort of a coexistence agreement whereby they'd be Patent Factory and I'll be Trademark Factory. So I looked him up, patent attorney with gazillion years of experience, and looked like a good guy with some great credentials. So I go on his website, I look that up, just about to email him, and then I continue my research. I realize that the guy is dead. He just died.
Oh my goodness.
Right, right,
Oh,
and with uh, patenting services, the way he did it, his trademark was not registered in the name of a company. His trademark was registered in his own personal name, and
ooh,
that is actually very
that's
important.
another big lesson.
Yeah, so his trademark was registered in his personal name, and since he was dead, there was no possibility for anyone showing that there is active use of a trademark after he died, right? So I initiated the cancellation proceedings against this trademark, basically saying, yeah, he's not going to be using it anytime soon. And
Funny,
I'm,
not funny.
I mean, look, exactly right. I'm not making light of the guy's death, but that's how trademark use works, right? If you can't show use that you're currently using or have an intention to resume use in the immediate future, the trademark will be canceled. So we killed Patent Factory trademark, and Trademark Factory trademark got registered. So that's a lesson. That's a lesson
Yeah,
for people in that.
that's for sure. And so as far as things people should think about after they have registered their trademark and they've got that part all done. So the first thing you're saying is to make sure you're picking up breadcrumbs of evidence of use all the way along. So anything that has your brand on it, your anything that you have trademarked, that you've got proof of use sort of year over year, in a continuous way, so that you've got that system and process in place for your business, so that you can prove use should anybody decide to come after it. So that's the first thing. Is there anything else that people should do to make sure, like, how does someone make sure that nobody else is actually using what they've trademarked in the countries that they've trademarked it? How do they make sure? Is that something that they need to figure out a way on their own, or is that something that they can pay Trademark Factory to look after on their behalf? um, I imagine with all of the systems and processes you've got set up, that you've probably got something already set up that looks after that part.
We actually do not, and very intentionally, because we wanted to focus on one thing we do exceptionally well, and not pretend that we're just as good with other stuff. So we don't do disputes, we don't do litigation, we don't do investigations. We don't do any of that. Um, we can connect you with someone who's very good, but that wouldn't be under the umbrella of Trademark Factory because again, we want to focus on one thing. We want to be known for one thing, and that goes outside of that level of expertise. Now, there are companies that do monitor the space, that can monitor the space for you. Funny enough, I just spoke with um, a lawyer that I've worked with back in Russia 20 years ago. We spoke today, right? He's on the board of one of these companies that actually monitors um, uh, unauthorized use of trademarks and copyright by others online globally. We spoke about setting up a call with their founder, between their founder, me, and the lawyer, just to see if there is any synergies. So I'm not going to promote their name just yet because I need to have
Nope,
heard
that's good.
more about
Yeah,
what the,
I want,
you
yeah, I don't
know,
want you to put
about,
yourself in a bad position either.
right. So I want to first figure out, how good they are, what they can do, and stuff like that. But there are companies that are trying to enter that space, and monitoring is one thing. Doing something about what you've found after you've seen an infringement is quite another thing. There's a myth I wanted to dispel, because I'm sure people have heard it, that trademark owners are required by law to fight everyone who may be infringing on their marks. That's not necessarily true. It could be interpreted as that, but it's usually taken way out of context. So the way this works is, if a brand owner can be said to have quietly allowed others to rip off their brand without taking any action to stop the infringement. So if someone is openly infringing on your brand and you know about this and you do nothing about it, then others can say that the brand owner is giving the public an implied license to use their brand, because they're not defending their brand against an open infringement. So that's from that perspective. Yes, you have to go and fight sometimes, but if it's a very obscure thing that nobody sees, and like those David and Goliath stories, where big brand was like, yeah, I'm sorry, we really don't want to go after you, but we have to, because if we don't, our brand, no, right? It's if it's really someone who's so small that nobody knows about, there is no requirement for the brand owner to go against them. And there's really nothing wrong with big brands defending their brand by attacking small players, right? They just find it they feel uncomfortable doing that with all the attitude that media is giving them, about,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're a big brand, you should feel guilty about your success, right? But which I find really appalling. But it's a topic for another call. But in reality, if you do see someone openly ripping you off, yes, you have to go after them, and at the very least, you have to uh, send a demand letter and show that they can't do that. And whether you take it to court or not is a different issue. But
So if you
yeah,
to send a demand letter, or a cease and desist letter, whichever, I guess it's called different things depending on who you talk to. But if does that have to be in a specific format? Does it have to go through the trademark office? Does it just go direct to the company that's infringing? How complicated is that process?
so I'm going to give you a quote from one of my lawyer friends, which I really like.
Okay.
He says, he says, those who want to go to court, they file a lawsuit. Those who want to threaten litigation, they send demand letters. Right? So the idea behind that is, you're not really required to send any demand letters before you file a lawsuit.
So
Right?
you could just go straight. You could go straight for the big hit right off the top.
Yeah, and really, the way the court system works in U.S. and Canada is that more than 97% of lawsuits ever filed never see the light of a courtroom. They all get settled before, right? So the strategy is, you file a lawsuit, you get your big gun lawyers to file a really scary lawsuit, in the hope that the defendant will fold to their demands quickly, but that shows enough intention that if they ignore it or they don't fold, then the plaintiff will move forward with a lawsuit, Whereas with a demand letter, usually what happens is that so somebody sends a demand letter, and the recipient of that letter, they evaluate how likely is it that if we ignore that demand letter, that the writer of the letter will pursue this further, right? And if the letter is written by the entrepreneur themselves, the likelihood of them going to court is very, very low, right? So what typically happens is, so whoever receives the letter, they look at, okay, so they didn't bother to hire a lawyer to to spend maybe 500, maybe $1,000 on a letter. Okay, so they didn't do that. Okay, do they have any registered trademarks? Oh, they don't. So they didn't bother spending money there either. What is the likelihood that they're going to spend 50, maybe $100,000 on lawyers taking this to actual court? Probably, you know, probably slim and none, right?
Yes. Yes.
So they just ignore it, no matter how scary you make that demand letter, right? Oh, you infringed this and you infringed that. I'm going to do this to you and I'm going to do that to you. But nobody's really afraid of that. But
Yeah.
if that letter comes from a big law firm, which is often the big reason to hire an expensive law firm to write that demand letter for you, is just to create that impression that, okay, they've spent the money on lawyers to write this. They probably have the money to fight this all the way, right? And you don't know one way or the other, but if you get the letter on the letterhead of a big expensive law firm, it's usually given more weight by whoever receives it compared to it just being an email from from you directly, or a letter on a letterhead from your family, personal injury lawyer across the street, your Uncle Bob, who's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to write the letter for you, right? It shouldn't work that way, but it does, right? It's like on the legal, from the legal perspective, your rights are either infringed on there or they're not. You're either right or you're wrong, but that's how things work. And with law, I always say, it doesn't really matter who's right and who's wrong. It doesn't matter what's legal and what's illegal. The only thing that matters is what can you do about it, and what are you gonna do about it, right? What you can and what you
Right.
will. And if we all saw this in the last 2 years. If I could get a little bit political with we all had rights on the paper, as technically citizens of free countries, and it didn't look like all of our rights were given the respect that we we were supposed to expect from the governments and from the companies, and people couldn't do anything about it, right? So yeah, you can go to court, you can spend a ton of money, you can spend a ton of time fighting over this, and you might end up winning. But
At what cost?
exactly. So your rights are only as good as what you can do about it, and which is really was why I consciously decided to only focus on intellectual property and trademarks, because kind of on the personal level, right? Don't want to deal with I don't want to deal with human suffering,
Right.
right?
Right.
I don't want to deal with sob stories. I don't want to deal with fights over who's the bigger scumbag. Uh, like
Yeah.
we've all
All of that.
witnessed,
Yeah.
the wonderful Johnny Depp trial, right? I don't want to be part of that, right? I
No,
want to
no.
sleep well at night, knowing that all I do is help entrepreneurs protect
Protect their
their
stuff.
assets,
Yeah,
right? And what they do with their assets, what they do with their brands, what they do to fight others is not up to me, right? My
right,
goal is just to give them the best chance of building something that might end up making them gazillionaires in the future, right?
right. Yeah,
That's all I
no,
do.
and
That's all I do.
and that is an awesome and worthy goal. I like it. You know, find your spot and just own it, right? That's the best thing ever, and that's definitely what you're doing with Trademark Factory. So I'm going to ask you one final question before we get ready to wrap. And what is the most complicated trademark that you guys were able to bring together over at Trademark Factory?
Oh my God.
You don't have to
We
you
had a
don't have to name
trademark.
names or anything if it's you know, anything like that. But you know,
Yeah. So
the yeah.
there was quite a few of them. One that stands out is a trademark we did for a client. I think it took us 5.5 years of constant back and forth. We had to file that trademark twice because so we filed it initially. We got an office action. We fought it tooth and nail. We didn't feel that the trademark examiner was right, so we filed it again, hoping that it would get to a different examiner. It did get to a different examiner, but they came up with the same objection, which I still disagree with. Then we had to fight a huge bank in in Canada to kill their trademark. Speaking of right cancellations, so we initiated that fight against the against that big bank, and we won. Even though they try
Wow.
to they try to provide evidence, we're like, no, guys, you're not really using that trademark. So we killed that. And I think, yeah, 5.5 years. And all they paid us is that initial upfront fee once, right? And
Whew, wow.
yeah, we lost quite a bit of money on that client.
I bet
But
they were eternally grateful though.
they yeah, the guy was happy, and obviously made for a great case study for us to show that look, this happens too, right? And obviously, we're not in the business of losing money. We're in the business of getting stuff done, and we know that there will be outliers like that once in a while, and we're okay with that because we it's like a casino, right? In a way, right? Or insurance, right? If nothing ever burns down, you don't need insurance.
But
but
you don't know that
but
until after the fact.
exactly, right? And same with fire insurance, right? It's the first question people are going to ask you when your house burns down is, was it insured, right? And imagine how you're going to feel if your answer is no to that. So it's the same way with brands, right? If you see someone starting a company with a brand that's very similar to yours, you're going to be getting all those questions from all your friends and and everyone really, was it trademarked? And again, imagine if your answer to that is no. And when we're starting out, it's good to go back to when you should do it. Most successful businesses trademark their brands long before they got big and successful.
Oh yeah.
Um, Under Armour, filed his trademark like years before it was recognized. When he was still selling T-shirts from his truck, right? Coca-Cola filed their first trademark in 1892, which is the year when they were selling 9 drinks a day. Yeah,
Wow. That's really
I
interesting.
call it a lemonade stand with a dream. Right?
Yeah,
I'm sure there
there
was a
you
lot of
go.
people. Right? I'm sure there was a lot of people who looked at them and said, "You guys are crazy to why are you wasting all this money on trademarks? Like what trademark? Like you don't need a wait till you get big enough, then you worry about this. But by the time you get big enough, it's too late,
Somebody else
right?
has
Like
already
it's
beat you to it.
yeah, it's too late to buy fire insurance on a house that's burned down.
Yeah,
Like you can't get a fire insurance as you're watching the flames,
no, no.
consume everything that you worked
Yeah,
on,
and
and
it is very, very, that's a very apt analogy to let people know, hey, don't wait till you're big and famous, because as you're working your way up to get big and famous, somebody is going to say, ooh, they don't have a trademark. I mean, it's the same. I understand it's the same in the patent industry too. People will, um, what do they call it? Farm the system, or farm they'll be on the lookout for things, and they'll watch for something that starts to get moderately famous, and they'll jump ahead. And people have done it with other people's names, their own names. They became a famous person, but right before they became famous, somebody else went to the trademark office and trademarked that person's name, right? And then they become famous and they can't even trademark their own name because somebody else did it first. And then they are like holding them hostage.
so I was, as I mentioned, working for the biggest law firm that had an office in Moscow, and I was part of a lawsuit. I I barely scraped it, but I was a tiny part of that team that worked on that. Starbucks spent 7 years trying to get their trademark in Russia because somebody filed their trademark first. 7 years and a lot of money, a
Oh, I bet.
very big lot of money just on us, just on the law firm. But forget their legal fees, right? So their legal fees were well into six figures. But but forget that. Think of how much money they lost on not being able to open a single shop in Russia for 7 years.
Oh my
That's the
goodness.
that's a much
Wow.
bigger problem. That's a much bigger problem because when someone trademarks it, it's not that you can't trademark the same brand. Right? It's not about the piece of paper.
Right.
It's more about you can't operate under that brand in that country because somebody else owns the monopoly on that
Yes.
brand, and that's, like I said, that's a much bigger problem. So
Hmm.
as you
Yeah,
said,
lost
when
revenue.
somebody right when somebody files their trademark or similar trademark similar to yours, right, whether they do it in bad faith intentionally just to prevent you and hoping that you would pay them off, or somebody can come up with a similar name even not knowing about you, right?
So,
If they're there first,
hmm,
then you have a problem,
yeah.
right? And as they say, if it's a problem you can fix with money, it's not necessarily a problem, but but
Only if you have the money to solve it.
oh, yeah, and what you're doing really is you're creating an unnecessary problem for you. You're creating unnecessary risk for you. So, is it okay if I mention the average price point that a client spends with us on
Yes, and then
trademarks?
I have a, actually, can you do that right after? We have a question from Kurt that he's put in the back channel. How does domain registration play into trademark?
Okay, it's a great question. So there's this system called UDRP, Uniform Domain Name Resolution Policy, that allows brand owners, trademark owners, to quickly and effectively fight cyber squatters who register domain names that are too similar to uh, trademark rights. So if someone registers a domain name that's too similar to a trademarked brand, and that domain name registrant does not have any legal interest in that name, you can, in theory, very quickly and effectively go through a platform with World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO. They have a mediation and they have a mediation. What is it called? The dispute resolution platform through them, and I think you pay like $1,500, and in a couple of months, their panelists are going to see if you're right or you're wrong, and you might get a domain name through that that someone registers that's too close to your trademark. That's one way to do it. The other alternative is, does domain name provide any trademark rights? And the answer to that is, at best, it could show that you have what's called a common law trademark. But the common law trademark, the problem with that is the only way to prove that you have one is to go to court and fight, which is going to be a lot more expensive than getting a registered trademark in the first place. So there's a
Ah,
reason. There's a reason that companies like Apple, Google, and Facebook, right? Really, all it is what they started with. They were just a website, right? So they had their domain names, right? Facebook owned Facebook.com and Google owned Google.com, right? If
right, right.
getting a domain name by itself was enough to protect the brand, why would they bother filing their trademarks days after they started? And they did,
Right.
right? So Google filed a trademark a few days after they got started with a name. Facebook did the same thing. So if owning a domain name was enough, they wouldn't bother paying lawyers, whatever they
To
paid their
trade. Yeah.
lawyers to get their trademarks, and they did, right?
Yeah.
So
Good.
yeah,
Okay. That kind of ties that one up, because a lot of people assume that if they have the URL and the domain name, that they're good to go, that they don't have to trademark. Well, I own the domain. That nobody can touch it, and that's
yeah,
not true.
it's funny because I always I love analogies, right? And I always, when people make those arguments, I give them the analogy from real life, usually with big brands, and it just makes it so obvious that if it was this simple, these big guys wouldn't be spending all this money on their IP. If all they had to do is just get a domain name, it's like $8 is much better than what you spend on a trademark, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
apparently it's not enough. If,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. Good.
So yeah,
I'm glad that Kurt asked that question. That's awesome, because a lot of people do assume that. They don't know any better. They haven't actually looked into it, and they assume that because they have the URL, they're golden, and it's not the case.
so you
So,
you know where this comes from. So there's a lot of
mm,
this. There's a lot of this talk about common law trademarks, uh, which is basically in US and Canada. You do have some very limited protection to your brand by virtue of you having used the brand long enough and you having made that brand known to a significant number of people uh, on a certain territory, right? And if you can prove that in court, then the court will say, yes, you have a common law trademark that you can defend against anyone trying to rip you off. And So the in theory it looks great, right? You don't need to do anything. Like all you have to do is just build your brand, and then if there's a dispute, you go to court and prove that you've got a common law trademark, right? The problem with that, of course, is that it's going to cost you a lot more to prove that, and there's no guarantee that you will prove that because what does sufficiently known even means, right? There's a lot
it's
of
up for
there
interpretation.
Yeah, and there's a ton of case law where small businesses, said, well, we've been operating for, 3, 5 years and we've got some sales here and there. And the judge was like, yeah, no, not feeling it. It's not enough. Too bad. So somebody would trademark the same brand, and the companies that were there, they came up with a name before someone registered that trademark were like, no, 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 that's our brand, that's our common law trademark, and the judge like, no, it's
No,
not.
you didn't
and
protect it.
and
You didn't take enough care to protect it. You're on your own.
yeah, and the reason I wanted to mention what we're charging for a trademark, not to do a big promotion, because anyone can go to our website and find out. But just to give people
Yeah,
context, right?
sure,
So
sure.
with with us, you spend on average $3,200. A client spends about $3,200 plus the government fees, because some of them go with one trademark, some will go with multiple. Some go with one country, some go with multiple countries. So on
Multiple.
average, it's
Yeah.
$3,200. A single trademark costs around 2,500, right? So that may seem high, obviously, if you compare that with all those $69 trademarking companies. But that's not where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is, if that sounds high, how are you going to even think about going to court to protect your common law trademark? That's going to cost you anywhere between $50,000 and $120,000 to defend, and you might even lose, right?
Yes, after
Doesn't
all of
make
that.
it doesn't make any freaking sense.
Yeah,
So and so anyone who says, yeah, I'm going to save my money on trademarking now, and if something happens, I'm going to go to court. Really? It it
yeah.
it it, it, it just it's just a really stupid decision. Whether you go with us or somebody else, it doesn't matter, right?
You're still paying a
Uh,
little bit of money now compared to court costs and lawyer fees and all of that sort of thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's just a nightmare at that point. And then you lose sleep and you get all stressed, and it's just, it's a thing. So no, don't do
Yeah,
it. Just go trademark.
yeah.
So with that, I think this is a good place for us to wrap the room. Thank you, Andrei, for visiting with us and answering all of these great questions with really, really interesting answers. Really, really appreciate your time. And so I want to thank all that joined us live, and thank you to those listening on the replay. Please do take Andrei up on his offer to connect by clicking on the pinned link at the top of the screen, and click on his handsome face to read his bio and follow him. And if you're enjoying the content, please go to the very top of the page and click the little green house to follow the club and get notified when new rooms get opened. I'm doing this once a week. Very rarely I am not on a Monday, but it usually, if I'm traveling and I can't have a quiet place to be to be on with a guest. So please do, click on the link at the little greenhouse and follow the room, and then you'll get notified when rooms get opened. And I just want to say good night, good people, and we'll talk with you again next week. Thank you again, Andrei.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and thank you for thinking of me as the person that your audience wants to hear from. And I love you as a client. We've known each other for so long. It's great to have been able to share this with you and the audience. So again, thank you for having me.